On this episode of the John 1911 Podcast, riots in LA, Anderson manufacturing, Lucas did what, and Wiley Clapp passes away. Okay, welcome back everybody. This is episode 374 of the John 1911 Podcast. This is going to be a solo episode. This is, I said episode 374. It's 9:43 p.m. and today is Thursday, June 12th. So, fun fact, this is kind of my second attempt to record this. I was about 10 minutes in, then I realized that the microphone wasn't working. So, it would sound like I was in a soup can. So, that kind of sucks. So, I'm hoping to get the boys together to do a regular episode tomorrow. Unfortunately, Danny's been busy dealing with some stuff with his family, and Kraken has been busy trying to dodge the all the rioters and stuff in his city, all that crazy crap that's going on. And I unfortunately have had a bunch of stuff popping up too. So I was going to do a solo episode earlier in the week, then do a 2-man episode. So, well, it's already Thursday. So here's the solo episode, and I'll do a 2-man tomorrow. It'll be time for the newsletter on Friday. So let's get into it. First thing is, I want to say, I'd say probably about half of you probably aren't even aware of who I'm about to mention, but a legendary gun writer by the name of Wiley Clapp has passed away. Wiley was a former Marine, and prolific gun writer. He had done a number of collaborations with various firearms companies. You may be familiar with some of his 1911s. He's done with Colt. He may have done some stuff with the old Tallow or whatever they were called. And I'm not going to say I knew Wiley Clapp. We've met. We interacted professionally and somewhat personally, probably about 10 years ago. He was very gracious. Kind of had to talk to me. I kind of had to talk to him. I could tell he really didn't want to talk to me, but he didn't. I'm pretty good at reading people, but I had no choice. And we trudged through it, and he was a a fine person. And so we'll have a link to the farewell to Wiley from one of the gun magazines. I might have been Shooting Illustrated. On the website, you can read about it and read about Wiley and kind of how he operated and his mark left on the world. He was probably one of the last of the old school gun magazine gun writers. So Wiley, as far as I can tell, wasn't really on the internet. I'm not saying he didn't have a YouTube channel, but it's never even occurred to me to even look for one. So if I can find something on the internet, even just to show you what he looked like, or maybe him talking, I'll put that in the comments section. You can see that John1911.com. I guess I should mention the riots in LA, but you know what? I had mentioned it in the now gone 10-15 minutes of this episode, and I don't feel like rehashing it again. We're all kind of just tired of it. The media lies, the left lies. They foment this stuff, and they do it for political gain. And we're starting to see more stories of magical phantom pallets of bricks and pallets of, in this case, it was cinder blocks. And, I have come out publicly in the past and said that the FBI is so inept and so corrupt and so compromised. Their reputation was so damaged with the Russiagate stuff, and then some of the other things they had done, that they're probably irretrievable. However, I also recognize that the FBI is probably the best multi-jurisdictional agency for law enforcement and intelligence and counterintelligence organization in the world. To put it in perspective and terms for the American listener and the listener of this podcast, everybody around the world fears the FBI. The KGB, FSB, they fear the FBI. The MSS, the Ministry of State Security in China, they fear the FBI. Terrorists fear the FBI. And so even though I'm pissed off at the FBI and I think they I think that they've become this rogue organization. I'm reticent. Like if someone actually gave me the power to disband the FBI, I don't know if I would do it. Even though I want to do it. So, I can hold two positions in my mind at the same time. What does that have to do with the riots in LA? Well, it's real simple. Okay. We saw the pictures of the bricks and the pallets in, back during the first series of riots. Here it is, spring, summer 2025, and Donald Trump's president. We knew the riots were coming. Part of the reason why John1911 and me personally I've moved everything out of the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, these major urban centers, because I just didn't want to have to be vulnerable to this kind of organized criminal behavior by these national, transnational crime syndicates, the communists and the radical Democrats and Act Blue and, these other crazy progressive violent groups. And so, with all of that said, if dropping a pallet of bricks in the middle of a street in Los Angeles, or in this case, a pallet of cinder blocks, and they were big pallets, it's like multi-level pallets. It's not like, like a pallet like 4 feet tall. It was like an 8 foot, 10 foot tall pallet. It takes a box truck or a flat truck to deliver that. It takes a forklift to unload that from the truck and drop it onto the ground. I don't know how many of these things are supposedly out there. I've seen photographs, assuming that it's all real, assuming it's not a false flag, assuming it's actually attributed to the right event at the right time. Los Angeles, the riots, summer 2025. Big ass box trucks and forklifts are pretty easy to spot on traffic cameras. They're pretty easy to spot on flock cameras. They're pretty easy to spot on dash cameras. They're pretty easy to spot on Ring doorbells. They're pretty easy to spot on, Tesla 360 camera security systems. And if a box truck had shown up in downtown LA and had dropped off a giant fertilizer bomb with a forklift, I would have already had the VIN number off that truck from the FBI right now. But this stuff happens and nothing ever comes of it. No one even addresses it. And so this is my statement and my appeal to the FBI and its current director, Kash Patel. I'm willing to give you a chance. I'm willing to say maybe the FBI isn't as inept and or malevolent as they appear to be. And there is evidence coming out that these violent groups are being in Los Angeles and other places are being funded by national organizations, sometimes international organizations. The woman who's one of the Walmart heiresses supposedly is funding a bunch of this stuff. That's crossing state lines. That's RICO charges. There's this guy who is a tech guy, and he sold his company, and I think with the Howard University. He lives in China now, and it's actually his whole gig is he promotes communism. He's a full-blown communist and lives in China. He is apparently involved in fomenting and organizing and setting up these, quote, riots or, protests. I'd call them insurrections. And, if these people were setting off fertilizer bombs, they'd all be rounded up on RICO charges. They'd all be rounded up on terrorism charges. They'd all be and then everyone that was injured or people that suffered monetary damages or, emotional damage or physical harm. These people would be named and they'd be sued, but none of that ever happens. And so this is the chance for the FBI to get off their ass and figure out, let's just start with the pallets of bricks, at these riots in LA. It's cool story, bro. You guys rounded up the dude who's throwing the bricks at the ICE agents and you got him. Bullshit. Start with the fucking bricks, okay? Bricks are heavy. Bricks are expensive. Somebody paid for that. Even if you can't, it's not obvious, you could follow that truck if you wanted to. You could start getting warrants and looking at cameras and figure out where that truck went and then go there and be like, where'd this truck go? Where is this truck? Who owns this truck? How does this truck work? And then figure out where the bricks came from, who paid for the bricks, who took the order for the bricks, who how was it paid for, what's the contact information, and we can start running this down. Because again, if this truck had been involved in dropping fertilizer bombs off with forklifts in the middle of Los Angeles, we wouldn't hear the end of it. But I guess leftist communists and anarchists and anti-American douchebags are allowed to, do all this stuff willy-nilly with no consequences. And then the other side of the political spectrum, the politicians that are supposed, receivers of this kind of, these actions that, they run these cities, they get to use these crises as a method to either promote themselves, promote their careers, to maybe attack the opposite political party, or, hey, let's not have a crisis go to waste, pass some laws to take rights away from people. But since it's just commies, nothing ever happens. Bullshit. I don't know who listens to this podcast that would be remotely connected to the FBI. I don't know who would listen to this podcast that are remotely connected to, Cash Patel, or Don Bongino or whomever. But somebody needs to tell them the clock is ticking on this bullshit. Because if they don't figure out where these bricks came from, the whole thing is bullshit. The whole thing, oh yeah, we took care of that. Yeah, whatever. Shoo, that was negative. Well, it's gonna be one of those kind of episodes. So another story had come out, and in reference to a transaction of one business to another in our space, Anderson Manufacturing is apparently being purchased by Ruger Firearms. And so I will share with you what was reported. I saw this reporting on YouTube. I don't even know who the guy is who reported this. And then I actually have some more information that isn't quite being reported, but so here we go. So Anderson Manufacturing is a firearms manufacturer. They make low-end ARs. They're kind of in Cincinnati. They're local to us. They're just right across the river in Hebron, Kentucky. So in essence, they are in Cincinnati. They're that close. I mean, there's people that, quote, live in Cincinnati that are farther away from downtown Cincinnati than Anderson Manufacturing is in Kentucky. They're that close to Cincinnati. So most of you who have heard of this company may know them as the Poverty Pony Company. They primarily make ARs, and I guess they, sometimes they make, Gen 3. They started making Gen 3 Glock pistols. And then it was reported that Ruger is buying them, but the person that reported this was very nonspecific. It wasn't clear if they were buying Anderson to keep the brand running. It wasn't clear if they were buying Anderson just to buy it and pack it all up and take it back to Ruger, and if they were going to keep the Anderson line running at all, or if they were going to fold up Anderson and keep and then hang a Ruger sign on the Anderson facility in Hebron, Kentucky. I'll tell you this, it's a nice facility, and they seem like they've got some pretty nice equipment in there, which may come as a surprise to a lot of you, and it definitely came to me, which I will add to the end of this on stuff that wasn't reported. So it isn't clear exactly what's going on with that, but the guy on the YouTube channel, he did mention that there were some questions of embezzlement inside the company. There was some rumors of something, there was some trouble there, and he attributed that to why the company was being sold. So that is the end of the reporting that I saw on YouTube about Anderson and Ruger and what I know as of 9:57 p.m. right now. I should have looked at it before I did a podcast, but we're busy, lots going on, and trying to get it done. So here is what I know and you don't know, and most people don't know. And I wasn't in a position to say anything because it wouldn't have been professional or courteous to do so. Last year, I was approached by a third party as to if I would be interested in purchasing Anderson Manufacturing, Anderson, firearms. I had a series of conversations, nothing official, no conversations with the official people at Anderson directly. Um, and I'm going to kind of go through the thought process now as to what I went through in my head because Anderson wasn't really a company I paid attention to. I knew they were there, but I didn't really understand what it was. So, I mean, I kind of knew that I've heard of Poverty Pony, but to tell you that I knew that much about Anderson, I really don't. I mean, I just don't buy like those kind of cheap firearms, especially ARs. I think at some point in the last 18 months or 14 months, I was kind of interested in one of their dissipators, which is their carbine length AR with a rifle length barrel and gas system. So, that's kind of a fantasy gun that exists. I don't think that ever existed in real life. They made something like that. It wasn't off the top of my head. It's not clear to me if that was ever uh, a something that like if it actually was a functioning rifle length gas system or whether it just had a handguard on it. I don't remember. So in discussing this, it was like, well, I don't know if I want to be in the AR business. It seems like a red ocean. And then it's like, well, Anderson Manufacturing kind of has a real terrible reputation in the AR business. And so I started, looking into it. But I will tell you this, I've traveled quite a bit in this country and I go to a lot of gun stores. And more often than not, when I go into a gun store, there's an Anderson Manufacturing something in that store for $49, $59, like a receiver or something. They're everywhere. And so when you start to think about it, you're like, you know, how much money does this company make? Like what's going on here? Like, like forget the whole, people fight over Anderson, whether it's crap or not crap. Cause the gun nerds, people that don't shoot arguing about guns is like its own level of special short bus helmet people, but um it's like, well, I really don't want to go into this business. And if I did do it, um I'd probably want to start coming up with stuff that would be, higher quality. And why don't they do higher quality? And I started looking at some of their facilities and looking at, equipment that I could see and trying to figure out some of the numbers. And I started realizing Anderson is huge. Like I had no idea. Like I just don't care. And Anderson was, in my estimation, huge. I'm not going to publish the number that I think the company was worth, but it was a sizable company. And it also made me wonder, and this was in discussions with the third party, is Anderson OEMing stuff for other people? Because I think they are. I think there's a high likelihood of it because I don't, their little bullshit Anderson stuff with that name and their reputation and the Poverty Pony doesn't pay for all that equipment that's over there in Hebron. So I'm like, there could be more here. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, do I even want to get into this? It's like I'm trying to do other stuff. I got other businesses going on. I'm still trying to do stuff with John 1911. It's like I don't really care about ARs that much. And then like, Glocks. I mean, so ultimately I decided it wasn't gonna be for me, and I went ahead and turned it down. But there a couple things did come up. So here is what I do know. So it is a family run business. There are, if could be wrong on this. There's a couple brothers, if it's two or three brothers, that have kind of run this business. A lot of family in this business, and so and what was told to me again, this is when it wasn't public. This is last year. I was told unofficially that they had. I don't know the order in which this was discovered, but there was an embezzlement issue inside the company. Now, I do not believe the embezzlement issue is what caused the sale. Actually, the way it looked to me was because I've been through sales of companies, is especially like a family owned business. Here's kind of how this works. All right. And so don't try to put this on the T-Rex, at least not right now. Let's just talk about Anderson for a minute. So what happens is you get a business and it's run by a family, or let's say it's a father, and then he's got a couple sons or whatever. Then it's like, well, you bring people in, you've always got a job here, and like, and then, so you start having, you know, this entity that's kind of supporting a family. And then what happens is you start running things through the business and it's all legal and it's all fine, but it's like, okay, well, we've got the business, we do whatever. Uncle Joey works here. Uncle Joey needs a car. Why don't we just, you know, get Uncle Joey a truck that weighs over 6,000 pounds, and we can expense it through the company, and kind of, it's kind of like this wink nod, it's part of his compensation package or whatever. And you start to see this kind of stuff. This is not uncommon at all. It's two philosophies on how to run a company. It's, you know, companies that throw off cash to benefit the owners. Owners take big checks. Owners take large salaries. Senior staff member takes large salaries, and plus they have to have money to operate. They have to have money um, to buy new stuff or to expand. They have to have probably a line of credit with the bank, so they can make payroll every 2 weeks. And then there's covenants, and if there's inventory, there's a lot of finances here, and it doesn't matter what the business is, especially if you've got, a large amount of overhead or, money tied into equipment, especially if you're like financing that equipment. Like you got $1 million piece of equipment, you might stroke a check for it, but it might make more sense to finance it over 18, 36 months or whatever. And so you have to have relationships. So what ends up happening is, and this is my understanding with Anderson, is there was one brother or two brothers, or maybe one of the brothers died, but they've been running this business for a while. And the reality is, when you run a family business like this, you may get a nice salary, but you may own this company that's worth, I don't know, let's just say it's worth, just on paper, let's say it's worth $30 million. And the owner of the company, he's 65, he's whatever, he's tired of doing it, he wants to move to Florida, he's getting older, maybe whatever the situation is. His net worth is in the company. There is no cash. There's no mechanism for him to just run off and go and be retired, because the company still has to function. And if he isn't working as the CEO or whatever, you got to bring people in, and like he can just get it, he can maybe keep getting his money all he wants, but then you've got these people that want to leave the company. It makes it harder on the company to keep paying these people. They just can't, just because their last name is Anderson or Smith or Wesson or whatever, there isn't really an exit. So here's what happens is, okay, so it's like, hey, we got to get this company ready to sell it. Well, you start looking at the books, and you start looking at the EBITDA, and you're looking at the this, and you're looking at that, and how much profit is there, and the multiple of whether the industry is it, by earnings, is it, if it makes this amount of money a year, then you multiply it by, is it a 3 or 5 or whatever, this is what the company's worth. Well, a lot of these family companies don't make a lot of money on paper because they're buying a lot of trucks and they're paying big salaries, and there's not a lot of actual profit on paper, because it's the money's either going back into the business or it's benefiting the principal family members. Well, if you go to sell this company, on paper it doesn't make any money, and you're like, your company isn't worth a whole lot. And I'm not saying this is what happened with Anderson, but this is what happened with Anderson. And so they started having to clean up their books, and they discovered, ta-da, that in the process of getting ready to sail, that I think it was a sister-in-law who was an accountant who had run the books at the company for a long time, was stealing money. Now, she's accused of stealing money. I guess maybe I could say, uh, um, she hasn't been convicted, but I believe she was in negotiations. as far as what was going to happen to her and what was going to happen according to the Commonwealth of Kentucky as far as how that was going to be handled or prosecuted if she was going to pay back the money. So it caused a lot of trouble. And if you look in the paperwork of Anderson, again, I knew all this last year when I was looking at Anderson if I wanted to buy it. And if you will look, they actually, and this is not uncommon, this is a big tell, it's a family run business. They brought in a guy from the outside to be the quote, the CEO of Anderson. That's because this guy's got to come in. And if you look, a lot of times these guys that come in, they've shepherded a sale. They know how to clean up books. They know how to tidy things up, to present things, for investment groups or brokers, to sell the company. I even know that they were going to SHOT Show to shop it around. I knew during SHOT that this company was still for sale at SHOT. When they flew to SHOT, it was still for sale. And so obviously, I guess at some point Ruger decided to buy it. Now it's interesting. Why would Ruger buy Anderson? I don't know. I don't have an inside into Anderson. I have my suspicions on the size of the company that I think there's an OEM relationship. They could be making stuff for other people. This is not unheard of, especially in the 1911 game. But I'm not going to go that. I'm not going to open that can of worms right now. But I don't. I don't know if Ruger bought them because they've got lots of equipment and expertise, and they can actually make stuff to a high standard, maybe to Ruger standards. Maybe Ruger, because Ruger's starting to come out with some lines. Maybe they want to buy the facilities and the capacity that Anderson has, and then they can just make stuff for Ruger, and it becomes a Ruger facility. Or maybe they just wanted to buy the equipment and take it all down to wherever. So I don't know what it transacted for. I don't know. I would be curious to know what it transacted for to see if my estimations were correct. But again, I didn't get access to the books because I wasn't ready to go that far with it because I just wasn't that interested. So, yeah, the rumors that were reported that there were some embezzlement issues in Anderson are true. Last I checked, I don't know if that's been adjudicated yet or if that's been handled with the Commonwealth. But it is not the reason why the company was sold. The reality is the principals were of age; they wanted to retire, and so they were shopping around and they found their exit. And as someone who has done that and has been involved in that, and am a firm believer in that, let me tell you this, because you guys probably aren't going to hear it because if the Anderson people ever hear this podcast, I tell you this from the bottom of my heart because I know how good it feels. Congratulations. Hopefully you got everything you want. Selling is never as easy as you would think it would be. It's always crazy shit that comes up all up to the last minute. It sounds like you guys have been through the ringer. Enjoy your retirement. I hope you got all the money. I tell you what, I hope you got everything that I think your company was worth. I was shocked by it, which is true. If that is true, y'all did great. Congratulations. Okay. I'm having microphone issues tonight. Now let's talk about T.rex. Lucas, the Botkin family, and Lucas Botkin. So if you just listened to everything that I said about Anderson and family run businesses, you may get some insight as to where I'm going to go with some of this. I'm pretty objective about business stuff because I'm a business guy, serial entrepreneur, whatever. I just happen to be a gun guy. And, the first thing is, look, I said some stuff in the previous episode where, I talked about that there are entire segments of business where they just specialize in settling disputes among family members and family-owned businesses. This is so common, Anderson. It's so common that it's its own specialty in business. you have mediators and attorneys, and you probably even have some brokerage firms, some brokers that specialize in some of this kind of stuff. Um, so with all that being said, some stuff has come out since the last episode that was kind of shocking, kind of not shocking, and I'm gonna be fair to Lucas, and I'm also gonna be fair to the other people at T.Rex Arms. So they're not all, I would say, Botkin family, but apparently there's one of them that's not a Botkin. So the first thing is, it kind of came of as a shock, was that T-Rex Lucas Botkin does not own T-Rex. And it's like, holy shit. How does that happen? Well, he explains it. He started the business, and I don't know what he gave the timelines and the years, but I'm not like someone that like am that interested. I mean, I kind of like what they stand for, which it definitely hasn't aged well. I like what they stand for, but I'm not like I'm following, like I'm wearing their jersey or something. So like when he talks about in 2019 or 2020 or this year, and he did this and he did that, I don't know where the company was, or how things were going. But um, what is interesting is he apparently agreed to let multiple brothers come in, gave them ownership of the company, and they apparently did not bring any investment into the company. So they didn't provide any capital to buy any shares. He just signed over ownership, and he claims he didn't really understand the idea of 51% ownership. So he was less than 51% with, I think it was at least two brothers. And then at some point later on, a third person came in who was, I guess, according to Lucas, a very important family mentor to him, that is almost like a brother or something, that came on board. And it wasn't clear to me if all the brothers gave up some to give this person ownership, or if Lucas gave up more. It's not clear to me that it's even set up as 25, 25, 25, 25. Like, I don't even know. Which, came as a shock, but it's not illegal. He signed the contracts. Um, but it kind of makes you wonder a couple things, and some things that maybe, the average listener isn't quite going to see coming. I guess the first one is, you know, the only real insight I have in the T-Rex is kind of if I catch some of their social media. And one of the things I've noticed about Lucas over the years is he leans into this idea that he's a CEO. I'm the CEO. I'm the CEO of this company. We have 100 people or 60 people, 100 people, whatever it is, which is totally fine. I've been there. And at one point he's even talking about like how busy he is, and he's not shooting as much, and because he's being a CEO, and all of this. And it's like, well, okay, well, knowing what we know now, were you the CEO? I mean, it was just a title. Were you actually, like, how was this functioning? Were you like a minority owner, but you were functioning as the CEO that was reporting to the board? And because again, Anderson Manufacturing, to get ready for sale, they brought in a CEO. This is not hard. CEO doesn't mean you're the owner of the company. You're a chief executive officer, means you run that bitch. Okay. And it doesn't even sound like Lucas was running that bitch. And so he doesn't own it. He's not running it. And it's like, okay, what the hell's going on over there? Like, you know, like, is he okay? So I would assume, for example, I'll give Anderson, I don't know this. I'm sure it's probably can be figured out, but like they brought in a CEO to come in, and that person gets paid handsomely. to kind of shepherd the deal or do what, especially you bring an outside person in. You don't bring in outside CEOs and pay them, whatever. Like they're usually getting paid well. So maybe Lucas wasn't an owner, like a majority owner, but maybe he was getting paid very well. Because again, like I told you with Anderson, companies can operate two ways. They can operate for the benefit of the principals, the beneficiary owners of the company, or the company can operate to generate a profit on paper for itself that can be distributed, to the owners or whatever. But, distributions and, taxes and how they want to handle all that, it definitely sounds to me like T-Rex Arms is a family business. And like the whole idea of like, well, Jimmy needs a truck and let's just make sure it weighs over 6,000 pounds and we can run it through the company and the write-offs. We'll lease it too, because leasing is terrible, but when you do it through a company, the company just writes it off, and it's better to lease the truck than to pay it in taxes. This is very common. So we've heard some of Lucas's side, but there could be another side here. And I'm not taking that position. Actually, again, I'm quite the, from 30,000 feet, a fan of Lucas. I don't know if he and I would get along in real life, but, I kind of respect kind of like what their vibe and what they're doing. But, Lucas isn't perfect. He's kind of a troll. And I wouldn't be surprised if that trolling was also causing some issues with the other owners because they want to be more professional, and maybe he gets on the internet and goes, rah, and goes, says some crazy provocative shit, gets their Instagram shut down, gets their YouTube demon or whatever they're doing, because I remember that he was always having these issues. And now looking back with his social media getting throttled, and you wonder if looking back now, if some of the owners were like, motherfucker, we're trying to sell fucking holsters and you're getting on the fucking internet running your goddamn mouth like a crazy person, and you're going to cost us money because the whole point of the social media campaign is to sell holsters. That's one thing. And here's another thing. Again, this is the side not for Lucas. This is the other side. How do I say this? What is T-Rex Arms exactly? It's not really clear to me. So if I was, again, in a position to buy T-Rex Arms, if I was approached like last year, and it wasn't Anderson, but it was T-Rex Arms, and I'd be like, okay, what exactly am I buying here? Okay. Because one of the things that I would do if I was going to buy that company is you have these key people, okay? And they're kind of like the face of the brand. So you've got Lucas. It's like, well, if I buy this company, but Lucas isn't here, it's going to take a big hit. So even if I buy it, Lucas has got to stay because Lucas brings intrinsic value. And even though if Lucas is like, hey, here's Marky, he's buying the company, we love him, please keep buying the holsters. What percentage of the people would be like, fuck Marky, I'm here for Lucas? So there's that you got to factor into the price, because that's not a durable number. That is a number that would fall off. And so the other thing is, it's like, okay, so there's a cult of personality with Lucas. And then you started noticing that you started seeing diversification by T-Rex. And I can't help but wonder if this was also an attempt to diversify from Lucas. They started doing, the one brother's doing all the technology stuff. He's doing the radios and he's doing all the things or whatever. And then they've got, they've got their lab, and they're doing like maybe they're maintaining guns. I don't even know what they do in their lab, maybe their armory or whatever they're doing. But they started trying to branch off, and they were saying it's because, they want to have multiple channels and you can grow and you could do this and you do that. And sure, that's all true. And that's what they told us. But in retrospect, looking back, knowing that there's trouble, knowing it's a family-owned business, knowing Lucas isn't a majority owner, knowing they probably blame Lucas every time one of their social media channels gets throttled and banned off the internet, you can start realizing you can get a glimpse into some of the troubles that are going on in this company. that we just haven't really, been thinking about. And so let go back to the question that I asked early. What is T-Rex Arms? Because I still haven't actually answered that question. So there's a cult of personality. They're a holster company. I thought they were a holster company, but it seems to be like this cult of personality. It's almost like the Lucas fan club, but that's fine because Lucas can shoot, and she shoots, and he sells holsters. Like if Lucas was a hot bikini chick, he would sell bikinis. That's how it works. It's like, okay, but then they're doing all their technology and radio and networking and cyber and survival stuff. And then they've got, okay, so then there's that. And then it's like, okay, are they a production company, like a movie production company? Because, Lucas can shoot. Lucas didn't film in any of that shit. Is Lucas editing those videos? I don't know if he is or he isn't. It certainly doesn't seem like it. And it's like, so are they a production company? Okay, and then they started getting involved in politics, and they were going out and they were talking to their state house, and they were talking to politicians, and they were doing political stuff, like really stuff, like advocating for bills in their state house, not just popping off on the internet like I am. It's like, well, are they a political action committee? Are they a state? Like, what is T-Rex Arms? And it's like you start looking at it and you're like, I'm not really sure. Like, it seems to be kind of a mess. So now let's back up out of all that for a minute, and let's talk about the business. Let's talk about ownership, and let's talk about the state of the business and where they could be. The first thing is, right now, everybody talking about how Lucas is out of T-Rex Arms. That's possibly very true. Even though Lucas has come out and said that he left T-Rex Arms and he's executed he's going to execute a clause where they have to buy him out, and they're going to do all that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. I would not be at all surprised if they're still negotiating. There could be a realization that maybe they decide that they're going to sell to Lucas. Maybe they see numbers turn. It could also be a situation where they feel, and this is just as likely, if not more likely, that they feel that Lucas has already damaged T-Rex Arms. And if numbers are going down, and if sales are going down, and if reputation is going down, and if they're accusing T-Rex of not doing certain things or behaving in the best fiduciary and with fiduciary responsibility, it's entirely possible that the brothers could sue Lucas, because you don't have to be a B school graduate to understand that the value of T-Rex Arms is less today than it was 3 weeks ago, since certain videos and commentaries have come out. And so you kind of have to look at this, and so you have to ask yourself the question: we know what Lucas is. We have an idea who Lucas is. We have an idea of how Lucas lives. We kind of do. We know, he's married, and his age, and kind of how he operates and his personality. We know quite a bit about Lucas. Even if we don't, you do. Like, there's enough there to make a profile of him, if you're trying to like hunt him down as a terrorist. Like, not saying that. I probably should, that probably came out really wrong. Sorry, Kraken. But but you look at the other brothers, or the other principals, members of this company, and we don't know what we don't know here. Okay, like, they could have the position that T-Rex Arms was just some little bullshit plastic holster company until they came in. They brought in the production ability to make all the social media. They brought in all the IT ability to grow that stuff internally. They brought in all the engineering and technical ability to be able to automate their holster system, as opposed to Lucas in a garage with a grinding wheel and a mask on his face so he doesn't get Kydex cancer, making one little holster at a time. Like, you can make an argument that there's an entire other organization at T-Rex Arms that's like yo, dude, there's a lot more going here than your bill drill time. Okay. That's fair. But, and so if that is also true, there could be people at T-Rex Arms that their whole lives are T-Rex Arms. This is how they feed their families, pay their mortgages, keep their car notes, whatever they want to do or say. And they may not be in the position to not only not give it up, they may have nothing else to do in life. And if they feel that Lucas is, going to damage them, they may feel at some point it's necessary to stop Lucas or try to stop Lucas. And you could even make another argument because, and this is going to sound really crazy, but you can make an argument business wise that, Lucas approached the members of T-Rex Arms and said, I want to buy this company. I'm going to buy you out. I got to do this. We got to do the right thing. We got to do this. We got to do that. And he gave him a number and they said no. He said this. Lucas has said this. And he came back and he worked up another number. And he came back with him with another number. You would assume it'd be a bigger number. Hey, I want to buy the company. And they said no. Okay. Well, you can make an argument since the video was released by Lucas that the value of the company, what it would cost, on paper, what it should cost to be able to buy the company has gone down. And you could make an argument that, hey, if I'm going to buy the company, here's the new price. Maybe Lucas would be talking to him and he's like, hey, I'm still willing to buy T-Rex, but all this shit has come out public. I had to admit that I'm basically a stupid kid and I don't own this thing and I'm a fake lying CEO. I don't mean to say it like that. I'm just being dramatic. But you know what I mean? Like this is like not, kind of like some of the stuff Lucas is saying about himself and the way he's been portraying himself on the internet is not real, which is interesting because everybody's always said to like, Lucas isn't real. He shoots too good. Turns out he shoots good. It's just all the other shit wasn't real, which is like irony of ironies. But Lucas could very well be in the position where he's like, hey, if I was going to give you, you have to use round numbers here just to keep it simple. Like, let's just say, if I was going to give you $100 or I was going to give you $200, that was 2 weeks ago. Now the videos have come out. Now it's 125. And they're like, what? It was 200 before. And you could see where this is spinning out of control. So that's kind of where we're at with Lucas and T-Rex as far as, I can tell kind of where we're at. I don't think it's near over. This idea Lucas is out and they'll never take over T-Rex. Like, I'm not so certain that's true. We'll have to see what happens. There's no way these people aren't talking. There's no way there's at least wives, girlfriends, text messages, talking to dad, and, even the dynamics of, the idea of like a family that supports a business, there's even the idea of, it's entirely possible with the Botkins that as a family, they kind of all get into the businesses. There could be, what if they run a lumber mill and all of them are involved in a lumber mill and some of them are involved in this production company and some are involved in whatever. Like, so like what they did with Lucas and T-Rex Arms may be no different than what they did with the lumber mill or what they did with this business or did with that business, because that's just kind of how that family operates. We've heard stories that, they're kind of a very tight-knit religious family. We don't know what we don't know. So wait and see. Let's see what happens. Valuations fluctuate. I'm sure we'll have an idea soon. I hope it doesn't turn into lawsuits because I can tell you from personal experience, the only people that win from that are the lawyers. It's almost not even worth it. But when you're young and you're dumb and you're angry and you feel like you're aggrieved, maybe you want to go ahead and, spend money on lawyers. I don't know. But I'm going to end with this. When I first heard what happened with Lucas and T-Rex Arms, I figured, Lucas is tired of being the CEO. He wants to get back to shooting guns and having fun, like John 1911, right? Shooting guns and having fun. And he wants to go and do other stuff and be Lucas. He wants to He's tired of being T-Rex. He wants to be Lucas with a cape. Again, I'm not being mean. I'm just trying to prove a point here. Well, what if, like, I didn't think it would be entirely possible that Lucas would turn around and start a holster company. Well, considering where we are now and considering the bulk way in which that entity makes money and ultimately where Lucas's money comes from, what if Lucas starts getting into the holster game again? I mean, is Lucas going to start grinding holsters in a garage with a Dremel and a mask? Probably not. But there are companies out there that will OEM holsters for Lucas, and he could just go ahead and what's the joke on the internet? People are like, hey, if it's T-Rex Arms and he starts a competing holster company, can he call it Asteroid Arms that destroys the dinosaur? That's the joke. I mean, I didn't think it was possible that he was going to go into the holster game because that's why he would have left T-Rex. But now I understand what was really going on in T-Rex. We all do. And man, if he goes into the holster game, I mean, it's just could get really, really, really ugly. And at some point, I hope some of them sit down and can talk about money and talk about the future. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I think it'd be fair to say that no matter what happens, whether Lucas goes back to T-Rex or T-Rex and Lucas are separate and they become competing holster companies, either or, T-Rex Arms is about to get a lot smaller. Well, this wraps up episode 374 of the John1911 Podcast. You want to see more stories or pictures, links, everything we discussed, please go to the website at John1911.com. That's JOHN1911.com. Remember, it's all about shooting guns and having fun, not fighting with your brothers. Everybody, have a good night.